Okay, good evening. It's Town of Austining Planning Board for February 19th, 2020. Let's go around the board and introduce ourselves. Donna?
Donna Sharp, planning board member.
Welcome, new member.
Thank you.
Carolyn Stevens, planning board member.
Ching Hua Chin, chair.
Gareth Huffman, planning board member.
Jim Bastinas, board member.
Nancy Arcia, consulting engineer, planning board.
Sandy Anelli, secretary of the planning board.
Valerie Monastra, consulting planner for the town.
Christy Adana, attorney.
Welcome, Valerie, as well.
Thank you.
Christy stepping in for
Kathy
Kathy.
Zelentis, yes.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the Behuchi subdivision, 51 Croton Dam Road, 2-lot subdivision. Lot 2 subdivision. Applicant?
Hello, I'm Ralph Mastromarco, consulting engineer for the Mr. Behuchi. I see you have the map up on the screen. What we're proposing is a new lot. That lot is probably twice the minimum lot size in the zone. I think what we're here for tonight is actually simply the ability to subdivide the lot. I don't think we're here to determine whether or not the house is in the right position or the right color or anything having to do with the house itself. We don't really plan to build a house on the lot right now. Our action is simply to subdivide the lot. So, with that in mind, I did send, we did get some comments from Mr. Ciarcia last time. I sent you a letter with my application, dated February 10th. I believe that we dealt with all of the issues that were of technical nature. There's Mr. Ciarcia informed me that, in a sense, he agrees with me that the original sewer from the existing house and the new house were supposed to be in two separate services, and when they constructed it, they combined it into one sewer, thinking that was permitted. Somehow it got approved. I'm not sure how. It's something that's readily repaired, and my client is already aware. I made him aware of it, and he certainly said that he would do whatever needed to be done to fix it.
Okay, what are you exactly referring to in terms of the sewer?
There's two houses on the left side of that map.
Okay, those are the existing houses you're talking about.
Well, one's under construction. The one on the
Okay.
right side is under construction. The sewer lines for those houses are combined in a single sewer running down the easement towards the upper right-hand corner.
Okay.
Technically, it's a no-no. We don't do that. If there's more than one house in the sewer, there must be a public sewer. I don't think the town of Austining wants to take over that sewer, so we have to separate those sewers. In a sense, that doesn't really, that's really not an issue with this application either. However, rather than argue the point, we've already agreed that we would fix it.
Okay. And we noticed that on your February 10th submission, you have on the second page, you have a discussion about the subdivision note on a formal resolution.
Yes.
Do you wish to go into that?
Yes. If the board's not familiar with it, there was a resolution of one of the three resolutions regarding this property. But in the last resolution, Mr. George Weeks was chairman at the time. He had a meeting with my client, staff meeting. At the time, there was a pump station down by the hot dog stand, right on Route 9A. The pump station was it must have been built 100 years ago, I don't know. It was in very bad shape, and Mr. Weeks asked my client, would he consent to not building another house? And my client said, well, okay, after 10 years of going through this process, he said yes. However, about 3 years ago, they repaired that problem. They got rid of the pump station, now it's a gravity sewer. So there are no issues of capacity any longer. And my client felt that it was now appropriate to subdivide the property since there was no longer that constraint. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, there is no restriction on the filed map concerning no subdivision at all. There's no restriction at all. Your board has the power to correct that mistake by simply letting us subdivide that property.
Are you suggesting that the board does not have the power just to accept the standing note in the subdivision that it should have said that there shall be no further subdivision of Lot 2?
Your board made that condition, and it can undo that condition.
Okay.
And of course, we ask you to do that on the basis of the fact that there's really no other constraint to subdividing the property. There was no real justification initially for that constraint. The lot we're showing, the new lot, is 32,000 square feet. The minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet. There is really no other reason I can think of that you would be against that subdivision at this point. There's no reason for it. There's no rational reason to prevent the subdivision.
Okay, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to let you continue on with your
Yeah.
application in a moment, but I was just wondering, does anybody on the board wish to have any legal consultation on these issues before we go further in the discussion? Could we go into executive session, for instance? It would be prudent.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Okay,
good.
so could I have a motion to go into executive session for that purpose?
So move.
Second.
Okay, thank you, we'll be back.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Okay, could I have a motion to return to public session?
So move.
Second.
No objections? Okay, does any members of the board have any questions of the applicants at this time?
One.
No? Okay. Do you have anything more to add?
What I'd like to add is that if there are no comments from the board, it's a public hearing.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I said if there are no comments from the board,
Okay.
I would ask that you set a public hearing.
Any comments on that? Any thoughts on that? Are we ready to go into public hearing for this? Sure, if you want to. If that's what you want. Do you think you presented all the information you have concerning about this current application as compared to the old former application?
No, there's more things I can talk about on the project, yes.
Such as?
There's I think I brought it up in my letter, but it had to do with frontage, and that issue, I don't know if it came up here, but wasn't at the last meeting. But under your town code, there is a specific provision that permits frontage on an easement. I don't know if I gave you the copy of there's actually a filed easement agreement. The filed easement agreement,
For 2018?
I believe so, that gives everyone on that road access, and it permits lot 1 to subdivide. It permits lot 1 to subdivide and still use the same easement. Yeah, I think I did give it to you, yes.
Yeah, but this easement is only binding between the properties, not the town itself. There's a little click.
Yes, I agree. But it is important, though, because if we didn't have that right, then the other owner could say, well, you both have burdened that easement, so there's no, I don't see any impediment to using the easement.
Well, if you have no further information you want to provide at this time, I guess can the board take it under advisement to consider for the next meeting? Or do you wish, or does the board wish to make a decision at this point?
So I guess my concern would be if there were other issues that didn't get included in the, whatever the note was about the sewer, if that was the only issue. Because there's a lot of steep slopes, and there's gonna be water runoff into Croton Dam Road, and were any of those issues addressed?
Yes. On our first submittal, we showed capture of any excess runoff in the rain garden, which is that green thing on the right there. It's a recognized way to treat stormwater. And if we make it large enough, it also controls some of the excess peak flow. That, but as I said in the beginning, those things are, they can be, with Mr. Sjarsky's concurrence, we can design that, to any standard he wants us to. We use the standard right now. We're not really subject to any state rules that I can see. It's too small of a project. So we just picked this, we picked the standard and said, well, this is how we're going to show schematically how that house can be constructed without impacting any downstream neighbors. But I did want to emphasize, though, that my action here today is really just to subdivide the property, to take this lot and make it into 2 lots. How that house gets built, I can't say that it would ever be built exactly like that. It certainly would be a guide to anybody who, to my client who wants to build a house, and that's how he would probably do it. We think it's a good layout. But if you find that you need to provide conditions that ultimately do appear on the plat, we can include that in this, at this stage.
I think my concern was not what you were going to do, was what the conditions were when the decision was that it couldn't be further subdivided, if there were other issues.
No, not that I know.
With this.
No.
So your position is that the sole reason why the planning board put that condition on the prior resolution was because of the sewer and nothing else?
Absolutely.
But there doesn't really seem to be anything in the record to support that.
That's, well, you're absolutely right. I checked the record myself. What we thought we would do is speak to Mr. Weeks. I don't know if he's still around, but he certainly was he was the only one on the, none of the board members had anything to do with that decision. It was his request of my client, as my client relates to me, that the pump station was in failing condition, and it was only intended to be a stopgap measure.
But it was a board decision. Ultimately.
Well, now, that's a good question. It was a board decision on the resolution, but whether somebody changed their mind when that plat got signed, I couldn't tell you. I wasn't there.
Well, just to be clear, once the board made that resolution, no one person could change their mind. So for whatever reason that it may not have ended up on the plat, and we can only speculate now, but the resolution was the action of the planning board
Right.
and what they're bound by now.
I don't disagree with you, but
As it stands now, I'm not speaking for the whole board, but as it stands now, with what we have, I don't feel comfortable changing the previous board's decision.
well, was there any reason why you felt that we couldn't build a house and subdivide that
I'm
lot?
not saying that you couldn't.
Other than that previous decision?
To me,
Is there any other reason?
that's enough. There was a board decision made that this would not be subdivided again.
Well,
And
that's
I don't feel
certainly-
comfortable at this time, based on what we're seeing, to change that decision.
I mean, frankly, I'm not finding any compelling reason to overturn the previous board's decision. You haven't provided any other than what you've just stated. And I've given you opportunity to say so,
Well,
to add.
Yeah, that's all I have. I mean, the lot is 2 times the size of the minimum lot size in the zone. The reason for that board, for that condition in that resolution, was only for this pump station. Pump station is gone now. There's no, that constraint no longer exists. It's a thing that happens from time to time where conditions change. You don't have those constraints anymore. Why wouldn't this be subdividable if that constraint is no longer there?
I'm surprised that if that was the only, I would have thought that if that was the only constraint, that it would be put into the resolution, that if that physical constraint ever went away, that it could be subdividable.
Perfect world,
But-
yes, that would have been a great
That's
thing to
not
do.
there.
Right, yes.
Um,
But the way things happen, they're not perfect all the time.
So for the most part, I'm thinking along the lines as Jim, that, you know, it's very cut and dry right now, that, you know, it cannot be subdivided. However, if it wouldn't muddy the water, I would be interested to hear, you know, any further arguments you would have at another time after further analysis. Perhaps you could convince us that, you know, there are no steep slope issues. I mean, it looks like there very well may be. But I would be open to hearing other arguments.
Okay. It's fair.
Myself.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thank you. Yeah, one of the things we'd like to do is try to speak to the previous chairman. He's the one that
I'm
asked.
not sure that would make any difference, because
Right.
he would only be speaking for himself.
No, what I'm saying is, he would confirm
Your
what my
client.
client tells me,
But
that the only reason for that condition,
that would not have occurred before the board. So it would, since we are only responsible to the previous board, not to one single individual, it's not gonna be persuasive.
it's not unpersuasive. I mean, it adds some evidence to this matter. I'd like to try to introduce it if you don't, if you don't mind.
Memories are fallible.
Oh.
I'm not,
What
I'm
would
not
be,
very comfortable with that.
yeah, a lot of things can change in 10 years, over 10 years. What would be the status of this application before us?
Well, right now it is not a public hearing. A public hearing has not been noticed, and the board, you know, is still confronted with this threshold issue of the condition in the resolution. So if the board does want to give the applicant an opportunity to make an additional submission to try to address that threshold issue, there's nothing to preclude that. But if the majority of the board feels that you're in a position to make a decision now, then you can be inclined to do so, and you can direct us to prepare a resolution, or you can take some time to think about it. You have heard some new information tonight, so there's really no obligation to make a decision tonight.
I think with Gareth, give him an opportunity to address whether or not this lot is buildable at all.
So you want more detail from the applicant
Yeah.
on the site.
I think so.
Is the applicant willing to do that
Sure.
without having any, obviously no guarantees?
No, I think that it's not a simple matter, I agree. I believe that you have the power to remove that condition and allow us to subdivide. I think your board can do that. And, if there's more information that needs to be brought into the picture, I think I do. I think I can bring some more information, yes.
One of the key things we need to look at in the zoning analysis is the zoning code now has a provision where there's a deduct on steep slopes on the lot. So take a look at that and see what it is in that zoning
Okay.
district. So I think that would be important
Okay, sure.
to report
Yeah.
back where you lie in terms of
I think it's a good idea.
conformance with that zoning standard.
Okay, sure. Was that just introduced, or?
Maybe about a year ago, year or two ago, I
A
think.
few years ago.
2017, was that part of
Yeah.
the big
Yeah,
zoning
yeah.
amendments?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Time
Okay.
before.
More than 2 years ago.
All right.
Seemed like yesterday.
I'll take a look at it, it's in the zoning code, but sure, okay, sure, certainly.
So I would just like to say that I just don't feel comfortable, since it doesn't specifically say that the sewer was, if the sewer was fixed, then then you could subdivide. I just don't feel comfortable that that's the only issue, so that's, if you could provide more information.
Absolutely.
All right, so it sounds like the board would prefer to hear, as a majority of the board, would prefer to hear more information from the applicant?
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
The majority.
Majority, yeah.
Because I tend to go towards
Right.
Jim's opinion, but I would be open to that.
And just so that, for clarification, the board is specifically interested in making sure that if you were to place a building on there, that it would be code compliant for all aspects of the zoning code, including like the steep slopes, but also setbacks, that type of
No,
thing.
we've done that, yes.
We don't want the applicant to waste their time on this at all, in terms of,
Right. Just
You-
No, I
you-
agree.
You could already tell that, I assume, you could already tell that we have some serious misgivings about overturning the previous board's decision.
I'm not perfect sure I understand that. I wrote that to you, yes. But I wrote our resolution to that as well. Constraint no longer exists.
Okay.
Can I ask, do you know if any of the neighbors are aware of this potential?
That's a good question, and that's one of the reasons why I asked to have a public hearing. I think that we have a public hearing, it may actually help us.
Okay, would it make sense to have a public hearing, and would it be available for us to announce it for a public hearing, just to make on this particular issue?
I think you would probably just notice the application, and this would just be one of the issues that has to be addressed as part of that application. It may be beneficial to hear what the public has to say on it, because this is a document that's a town record, and others may be aware of it as well as a condition that was on the property. So if the board wanted to notice a public hearing, but that would be another step and expense, and, you know, if the board and applicant are ready to go down that road, hearing what you've heard from the board tonight.
The applicant wants to do this, in other words.
Absolutely. I think he's well aware of what went on, because he was involved.
Well,
I don't know if
I'm not
everybody-
talking about what went on, I'm talking about, does he understand the risks involved before this current board?
I'm sorry, the what?
Does he understand what the current board is going to be deciding on, and what's the issues before the current board?
Right, no, I understand that, look, there's always a chance that your board will not approve the subdivision. It's clearly a possibility. If that is the case, I imagine you would give a reason for that. And if the reason is because the previous board said they didn't want him to do it, but didn't put it on the plat, I wish,
I think we reserve the right to say, very simply, if we want to, that we do not approve solely on the basis of the previous board's decision.
Record, yeah.
I think we have to, or personally anyway,
right, well then,
that right will not be weakened by our going forward asking for information.
okay.
That's my only point.
Right, well, Mr. Pacucci.
So we just want to give you more of a chance than.
No, I said, Mr.
Right.
Pacucci's a resident over here, his father lives in that house over there. These are not big developers coming in trying to do something that they shouldn't be doing.
Maybe it would be better to just hold one more meeting with the applicant presenting any additional information to the board. And then based upon that, maybe the board may have a more direct sense of whether you want to go forward with a public hearing or not. Or you could just schedule the public,
Can we do that, but at the same time notice it, just so that anyone who
Well,
wants
it
to
is-
show up.
I mean,
Or-
it's
or
it's
the
noticed,
On the
it
agenda.
goes out on the email blast, it's on the website,
But the
but
neighbors are
it,
not
but the neighbors
specifically-
are not, don't get the mailings
Right.
unless it's noticed for a public hearing.
Okay.
So, if you want to gauge the public at this stage in the process, then that would be the way to go. But if you still are trying to get over this hurdle of the applicant presenting something to make the board comfortable with the fact that this condition exists, saying that it can't be subdivided, and now you're willing to consider that, which it doesn't seem the board is at that point yet, then maybe one more submission from the applicant may be productive.
I would prefer to do it the way the attorney says, yes.
But
Okay.
is it your position at all that this board does not have the authority to deny it based on the fact of the previous board's action?
I think that's not a fair way of judging the application. You should judge it for what it is here, not for what happened 10 years ago. There's no constraint, zoning-wise or otherwise, steep slopes or otherwise, to constructing a house and subdividing that lot. The only constraint is what happened 10 years ago.
Well, I'm asking whether you thought, is it the position of your applicant who feels that there's no such authority? Putting aside what you
Well, my
consider the
applicant,
fairness.
no, my applicant is a house builder. He doesn't, I don't think he thinks that.
Well, do you
Yes.
then personally?
Well, personally and professionally, I believe that your board can create its own condition here. And certainly if you wanted to say, well, okay, well, we'll give it to you this time, but we want a real condition on this lot that you can't subdivide it, because frankly, it is over the zoning size, it's twice the zoning size. We could put 2 houses there, frankly.
But that's not considering the steep slopes, we don't know that yet.
Well, I can see them here. We're not, I know where the steep slopes are. The steep slopes are that
So
first
if I
one,
was
30.
really cynical, I would say in 10 years, he'll be back to split that lot into 2, since he's got 2 conforming lots.
This time we'll put a note on the plat.
Or
That
we
can be
can stick with
changed
the
too,
West note.
I mean, you can always,
And in fact, I assume your applicant admits that the fact that it's not, the condition was not actually on the plat is of no relevance here. There is no estoppel.
He knew, in his mind, the only reason why he agreed to it was he agreed that the pump station, once he lived in the area, he was run down.
But that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you whether,
That was his only
regardless,
reason.
that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you whether your applicant somehow has a feeling that there's an estoppel issue here. There's an issue that just because it's not on a plat, it gives him greater rights. That's what I'm asking.
That is a legal question, and I don't know, frankly, I've heard both sides of that story, whether the plat matters or it doesn't matter. But I think the plat does matter personally. I've been on the other side where the plat mattered.
Okay, so that's your position at this point?
My position.
Okay.
well,
It certainly worked against me in other cases where things weren't on the plat and then,
Right, but I'm not really worried about what your position are in, depending on what your client is. I'm wondering what your position is as a professional opinion.
well,
So
then
that's,
technically, your client could be in violation of his approvals, because the condition required him to put on the plat that there would be no further subdivision.
I don't know.
okay. I think this might be just a futile exercise if we ask him to expend more energy on this.
So I confess that after this last exchange, I'm less interested in seeing more information. I'm more inclined to just make a clear decision that I'm against it. Because I can see that you or your client is of the mind that it's legally challengeable, that the previous decision was challengeable, and I don't think we want to go down that road. So I'm changing my position, and I think at this point that we should just.
Well, as far as the other resolution from 2007 goes, it was legally challengeable, and that statute of limitations expired 30 days after it was filed with the clerk's office. So, I mean, that's a binding document, and I mean, so just to be clear, that it could have been challenged at the time and it wasn't, and I think that just goes more to the enforceability of the resolution.
So in other words,
I think it's become muddied with
Yeah.
with the last 5 minutes discussion,
Right.
so.
why
I'm
why
not
don't we
sure,
just-
what was in my discussion that changed your mind?
Well, at this point, there isn't a need to, I think. Do you folks, Donna, do you have any more questions?
No.
Carolyn? Could I have a resolution on this? Do we need a resolution on this?
Let them draft something.
I would ask you to, I would suggest that the board direct council and planner to draft a resolution for the board's consideration at the next meeting, based upon the discussion this evening.
Does the board agree?
Yeah, sounds fine.
Mm-hmm. Make it so. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, see you later.
Okay, we have a request for a adjournment. I assume there's no issues with that?
No.
Okay, so we'll grant the extension of the resolution of approval. Have folks had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, anybody, any changes on the minutes we want?
No.
Okay, could I have a motion to,
The extension,
I'm sorry?
the extension. of-
Oh, we need a motion on the extension?
Yeah.
Okay,
So moved.
This gentleman?
I think he was here on the extension.
you're here for the extension?
Yeah.
Okay, so, could I have a?
They haven't voted yet on it, but secretly.
So moved.
So moved. A second?
Second.
Okay, any objections?
It's like,
We
come
should have
on,
waited.
come on, Chairman first.
Yes, we should have taken,
We should have
I didn't realize you were
taken
sitting
it
there.
That's fine.
I just thought it was in submission, so.
No.
Okay, so the motion is moved and granted, so thank you. The extension is granted. Okay, the minutes, no changes to the minutes? Okay, could I have a motion to, I think Carolyn made the motion already,
Yes.
right? So any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any objections?
Well,
Okay, so the
Donna
motion-
would abstain.
Yes.
Right, so, yes, Donna abstains.
And I suppose on the last one too, correct?
This is your first meeting.
Oh, no, I mean on the last issue.
No.
No, you can grant the extension.
You heard
Okay.
it.
Just because you weren't a board member at the time that
Right.
the meetings were held, that the minutes
You can
are
still
being.
give minutes.
Has everybody been getting their emails?
Yes.
No?
No. I've called them up and messaged with the IT guy.
I got this one, so I think I'm getting them.
Oh,
Yeah.
on the town,
Yeah.
on the town email or on yours? 'Cause I sent-
I
Oh,
got them- I
my
got them-
personal, because
Oh,
I
I
have yet
haven't been
to
getting
go to
them
my
on my
town
personal,
one.
I've only been getting them by going to the town.
That's what
Oh,
you're
but
supposed to.
it's working? Yours-
Yeah, but my town is working.
Okay.
That's all I said.
But I will say that the only place I can access it seems to be from home, that somehow I can't, I tried to access it from my computer at work and it wouldn't let me do it, so.
All right. So folks, try to address the IT issues with, when we get a chance. Could I have a motion to, unless there's any new, any new matters? Any new matters?
Different for
No?
No,
Okay, motion to adjourn?
so moved.
So moved. Second? Any objections? No. Okay, thank you.